So this is what you'll see at the beginning of the page here. This is the actual visual representation of how the pages look like in the textbook. So you can see that there are 5 learning objectives here on the left hand side, and each chapter starts off with a little bit of a case study. This particular one, it's Mike Lazardius of Research in Motion. I want to advance to the next page. Simply click at the top here. Now, again, continues with the RIM story. I'm going to advance to the next page. And here we are, starting off with a section talking about profit. Now, profit's not a dirty word. The reason why companies need to make profit is to grow and expand. You can't just break even. If you break even, all your competitors are going to make a profit and grow and advance. So the reason why you need profit is to grow and advance. Also a definition here of what an entrepreneur is, and the key point is about risking. A couple of terms, revenue and loss, which most people know what they mean, but the language and phrases there are important to make a note of. And let's have a look at the next page. Page number 5, talking about risk, the chance of losing things. That's an important part of business, because if you don't take risks, then you're not going to be able to achieve opportunities that are presented. Stakeholders. Stakeholders is a term that comes from the 18th century, when people used to go out into the woods with wooden stakes and mark them in the ground to indicate some piece of land that they wanted to have ownership for in order to dig up gold or silver. So stakeholder became a slang expression to describe people who literally own a stake in something, and we use it now in business to describe people who gain or lose because of some activity related to a thing that is important to them. So an example would be, if there is a park, the stakeholders are the people that live next door to the park, because if you do something in the park, like have a loud concert, then the people that have something to gain or lose would be the immediate neighbors. That's what a stakeholder is. Stakeholder for Seneca College would be students. If things happen to Seneca, it affects the students. It would be the employees, the staff that work there, as well as the professors, and also people that supply to Seneca. If you're a printing services company or a snow removal company, these are all examples of stakeholders. And talking about offshoring and outsourcing, I've got my own independent website which talks about that, but that's more and more a consequence of the competitive environment, where companies now use technological advancements to be able to outsource in other countries, particularly call centers in Canada. The 2 most common places are the Philippines and India, both countries with large English-speaking populations and have a high educational level for the people working in those countries. Nonprofit organizations. That's also an example of businesses that have to, when you say don't make a profit, I mean above and beyond. So examples of nonprofit organizations are things like the Cancer Society or the Heart and Stroke Foundation or Make-A-Wish Foundation, but they still have to have basic marketing and business principles. They have to get your attention so that you will buy into what they are believing, meaning raising money. Entrepreneurship versus working for others. When I started teaching intro to business courses about a dozen years ago at Seneca, most everybody wanted to graduate and work for a medium or large size company, but these days more and more students say they don't want that, because they know what happened to the parents who got laid off, and they want the opportunity to open up a business and work for themselves. So that's why entrepreneurship is an important part of this textbook, and it's mentioned right up front in chapter number 1. The factors of production to the creation of wealth. Some definitions here: land, labor, capital goods. Capital goods is simply a fancy way of saying money you use to buy things. All right. Now, if you're going out to the beer store to get a case of beer, you use money. If you're going to buy a 3-story office building, you don't use money, you use capital, because capital also includes things such as assets that you have in the bank or GICs or other things to be able to make that payment. Factors of production also include entrepreneurship and knowledge, which is just a fancy way of saying knowing how to do things. and there's a more detailed explanation of those 5 factors. You also notice at the bottom of several pages you've got these little progress assessments, asks you some rhetorical questions, and you should be able to answer those and then proceed onwards knowing that you understood those points. The business environment. Now this is where I have a little bit of a departure from the textbook. There are 6 environments that affect business. The political, legal, regulatory environment, which in Canada is quite significant. The economic environment, which is things like minimum wage, currency exchange rate. The technological environment, which is things like BlackBerries, access to the internet. The competitive environment, which is other companies doing the same thing as you. The social cultural environment, which is languages. We also have the global environment. Now, rather than saying the global environment, what they mean here is international business, but international business is a consequence of all these 5 things. The one environment that's missing is the geographic environment. So when I teach you, I want you to understand the legal environment, economic, technological, competitive, social, and geographic. The geographic environment is things like time zones, weather, sunset, distance, number of days of rain, things affecting crops, etc., which is a significant part. And the rest of this chapter then goes on for some discussion of the different environments. Now if you'll go to my main page for Whittaker.com, you simply scroll down to where you see the BUS106, click here. This takes you to the BUS106 page. Within the heading for September 2010, there are 2 things to complement the textbook material for chapter number 1. First of all, this video about the 4 P's and the 6 environments, which is on YouTube. Simply click there and watch the video. Secondly, this is a website about the 6 environments, which I set up quite some time ago. And in this website, it goes on to some detail talking about the things to do with the competitive environment, economic environment, physical, political, social, cultural, and technological, and discusses them in quite some detail there, which you should go through. That's in addition to reading the material in chapter number 1, which talks about the 6 environments. The other thing I mentioned was that the geographic environment is important, and if you go to this web page, click here, this talks about the geographic environment and how that affects business and marketing, particularly in Canada, where our geographical size is significant, our topographical, which means mountains, climatic challenges, our natural resources, and there's some interesting little maps here about the geographic environment and how that affects Canada. So go and look through that section. Also on this page here, weather extremes. This is another example of how the geographic environment affects business. There's a video here that you can look at me talking about extremes of weather, and also the circumstances of things such as global warming, and there's some very interesting comparative pictures here which you can have a look at, which is all part of the geographic environment. So you do that and you've covered off all the material here for chapter number 1.